Steve Jobs, Mr. Amazon,
Jeff Bezos, and third one is Larry Page, one of the CEOs of Google. In France, they coined the term to define the 5 most powerful companies in the digital market: Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. This acronym is GAFA. And if you can, as you can see, they have like a total of 7 billion users worldwide, and they are actually dominating the digital markets today. But I'm not going to talk about the history, the economic history of these corporations. I would like to try to show you how these corporations tend to present themselves through different means of communication, like product launches or advertising, and also in the corporate communication itself, so the internal communication of corporations. But first I would like to start from this video. Unfortunately we don't have the audio, so I try to dub Steve Jobs video. This is one of the most famous product launches in the history of digital media. It's the launch of the iPhone in 2007. And Steve Jobs here is narrating the history of Apple through some examples. And he says, every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes into light. And he starts with the Mac 1, which was produced in 1984. And Steve Jobs says, in 1984, we launched the Mac 1, and we revolutionized the history of computing. Then he presents the iPod, and he says, in 2001, we revolutionized the history of music. And now we are revolutionizing the history of phones. We are revolutionizing phones. So you can see this is the Mac 1 example. Why this presentation is so important? It's not just about the history and the presentation of a product of the iPhone. In this presentation, Jobs tried to posit Apple as the main maker of technological change. So the corporation itself becomes the reason behind technological and social change at large. We call it, in our work, this kind of narrative, corporational determinism. And this idea comes from a very old idea in media studies, for those of you who are used to study the history of media technology. And especially it refers to a famous book by Raymond Williams called Technology and Cultural Form, Television Technology and Cultural Form, in which Williams critiques what he calls technological determinism. Technological determinism is the idea that technology is not an autonomous agent for historical change. And Williams critiques the idea that television changes our society. Television as a technology by itself doesn't change anything. That's what it is. We have to consider also other elements such as social uses, politics, economic power, of course materiality, and also other social aspects. An example in the common sense is the idea that the internet by itself has altered our world. The internet by itself didn't change anything. The politics beyond the internet, the social and economics network acting behind the internet itself changed together with the internet our world today. An opposite idea to this idea of technological determinism, the idea of technology as cause, So the introduction of the internet resulted, for example, in new forms of political participation. It's contrasted by another idea that we produce technology because of our social needs. So technology is a result of, is a symptom, a product of social change. So the idea that the internet is the result of the emergence of a social need for new forms of public sphere. William says, no, we have to take both things together. And both views should be refused since they imply that technology is isolated rather than being in constant relation with social change. What do we mean with corporational determinism? This idea of ideas of technological determinism and social determinism, sociological determinism are now very old and old-fashioned. Whereas there's a new form, in our opinion, of determinism that is rising today. And this idea is corporational determinism. This makes specific efforts to stimulate the creation and circulation of narratives about their own development and contributions. They use broader narratives, like the idea of the digital revolution, like in the case of Steve Jobs, to promote their brand and to make corporate narratives stronger. And finally, corporation deterministic narratives help companies to build stronger, more recognizable identities and to present themselves as the center to wider social and technological changes. I'll try to summarize 4 elements of this process of corporation determinism, and referring to some studies in organizational communication, in corporate communication, but also in the history of media, and also taking as examples some old interviews and sources from the 70s and the 80s. The first one is the pasteurization of corporate history. I will try to explain with this term, which is quite interesting. The minimization, demonization, downsizing of competitors. How these corporations tend to narrate themselves as agents of the past, of the present, and the future of communication. And also the centralization in the public debate of discourses about these actors. The first one is an interesting term, which is pasteurization. As you know, we use pasteurization as a chemical process that comes from the inventor Pasteur. And through pasteurization, germs are eliminated in the name of a simple, rational, and powerful explanation. Corporations tend to use this strategy to pasteurize their histories, eliminating, deleting the bad aspects, failures, technological failures, for example, and to create a very simple, linear process of innovation in which the corporation itself is responsible. Think, for instance, at the construction of founding myths of these corporations. It's a case that Steve Jobs and Wozniak, Zuckerberg, Larry Page, and Sergey Brin, they all invented their revolutionary products in dorm rooms, garages, and places where they acted like normal people that from below created radical innovations. Actually, these are all myths because, for instance, the first Mac, the first Macintosh, was not actually invented in Steve Jobs' garage. They just worked a little bit on it, but they used an office to build it. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin, of course, they could not create the Google search engine in their dorm. But these founding myths are like narrative tropes. We can find them in all these cases again, because they represent these genius inventors creating something from scratch in this informal environment. Another point is the minimization of competitors. In this presentation, Jobs compared the iPhone with other smartphones. And you can see in this slide that other smartphones are quite hard to use and not so smart, as Steve Jobs says. Cell phones are useful, they are not so smart, are quite easy to use, but they are not so useful today anymore. And the iPhone is completely different. It's in another planet. If you look at this picture. There are some other examples here. I don't know if I can start the video. That's right. Anyway, this idea of downsizing and demonizing the competitors is a very old idea. There's a famous war between Thomas Alva Edison and Tesla for between the alternate current and the direct current. And for instance, this is probably myth, but Edison used the alternating current to electrify an elephant and to kill an elephant to demonstrate that the alternated current, the competitor, was very bad and dangerous. And this was in 1903. Another example of commercial war is the war between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. This is, we cannot see it, watch it, but it's an advertising which a kid, to reach the button to buy the Pepsi, used to Cokes to get higher and push the button. It's an interesting example. There are different forms of agency of these corporations of media change in the way they narrate themselves to describe this agency. On the past, on the present, and on the future. First of all, corporations tend to overlap the history of their devices and products to the history of media. According to Steve Jobs, Apple is the history of Apple is the history of computing. This is an interesting interview to Steve Jobs, published on Playboy, because Playboy was a very intellectual newspaper besides the erotic side in the 70s and the 80s. McLuhan was interviewed on Playboy, and in this case it is an interview to Steve Jobs. And in this case, Steve Jobs makes a parallel between the invention of computing and the Mac and the invention of the telephone. And he says, in the 1870s, Bell filed the patents for the telephone. It performed basically the same function as the telegraph, but people already knew how to use it. This is what Macintosh is all about. It's the first telephone of our industry. And besides that, the neatest thing about it, to me, is that the Macintosh lets you see the way the telephone did. So the user-friendliness of the Macintosh creates a new media, which is the personal computer, which is better than any other former technologies. Facebook also, especially Mark Zuckerberg, in this letter to the investors of 2012, Zuckerberg puts the history of Facebook in continuity with the history of all the greatest inventions in media and technology. So the history of Facebook becomes the history of social network. If you think, for example, as the title of the movie of Facebook is The Social Network. Facebook is the social network. And Zuckerberg says that Facebook, we are inspired by technologies that have revolutionized, again, this word revolutionized, how people spread and consume information. We often talk about inventions like the printing press and television by simply making communication more efficient. That led to a complete transformation of many important parts of society. Facebook aspires to build the services that give people the power to share and help them once again transform many of our core institutions and industries. By helping people from these connections, we hope to rewire the way people spread and consume information. So the social network is not a social network only at technical level, but also at social pragmatical level. In the presentation of Steve Jobs, it's clear how these corporations tend to present themselves as agents of change, also at the present stage. And so this idea in 1984, we introduced the Macintosh. Then it didn't just change it, it changed the whole computer industry. In 2001, we introduced the iPod. It didn't change just the way we all listen to music, it changed the entire music industry. today, Apple is going to remain the phone. So this idea that we live in a permanent revolution. Also in the present, we are revolutionizing everything because we have always revolutionized technology. We have always been responsible for revolutions. We can call it teleology, so the finalist vision of technology. Also at linguistic level, if we think at the claims and the mottos of these corporations, they act on the present, using, for instance, the verb make. We have to make the world more open and connected, make Google do it. This is the claim of the Google Assistant. Work hard, have fun, make history is the claim of Amazon. These are the headquarters of Amazon in New York. And also this idea of make Google do it reminds me of an old movie by John Carpenter, They Live, in which an alien population influence the behaviors of people putting these manifestos with some very strong orders like consume, reproduce, obey, conform, etc. When I looked at the manifesto, the posted by Google in New York like 1 year ago, it was quite the same. I find there is an agency on the future. This idea that these corporations can anticipate our social needs and our behaviors in the future. Think, for instance, at the search engine of Google. And Google says, Google is the perfect search engine. It understands exactly what you mean and gives you back exactly what you want. Even if you don't know exactly what you are looking for, finding an answer on the web is our problem, not yours. We try to anticipate needs not yet articulated by our global audience and meet them with products and services that set new standards. So we can anticipate what you are looking for, even if you don't know anything about it. Jobs ends up his presentation using this quote: escape to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been. Again, this idea that Apple is capable of anticipating and looking at the future before anyone else. But also some more technical and pragmatical aspects like the predictive analytics of Amazon. Amazon anticipates the delivery of products without the orders. So they try to anticipate and predict how consumers will operate on the platform in the future. The fourth point, the last point, is decentralization of corporate narratives. The effects of corporation determinism on academia are very, very relevant because academia is focusing much, if not most of its attention on these corporations. And sometimes they criticizing corporations, they tend to highlight the relevance and also to centralize the attention on the corporations themselves. I'm not only speaking about academia, but also at more general public books like this by Nicholas Carr, Google making us stupid. So this idea that Google is changing our way of thinking. On users, corporational determinism also has an effect. For instance, there's this. If you read this article, the first one, it explains how in Africa people think that the internet is Facebook because they access the internet through Facebook. So Facebook is becoming somehow the new internet for them. There are many inventions that are not that don't come from Apple, but people think they come from Apple. The touch screen, the mouse, they were not the personal computer. They were not invented by Apple, but people tend to think that these inventions come from Apple. And also always at a linguistic level, for instance, we don't use anymore to search something online, but we Google something online, to Googleize something. They even create new verbs that are also described also on vocabularies. And finally, the role of corporations in the public sphere, also the dark side of corporations. Mark Zuckerberg is becoming the most important character if we think about new policies about privacy and other relevant issues on data, especially after the Cambridge Analytica scandal. What's the problem here? The problem is not we have to sue Zuckerberg if he's guilty of something. The problem is if we pay all the attention on one subject, and in this case on one specific character, we risk to give all the responsibility to one man, who is Zuckerberg. This is not just corporational determinism, but this becomes something related to corporation as an individual actor that can be responsible for our situation and also for the dark sides of digitization today. So how to counteract these narratives, how to challenge these corporate narratives? First of all, we have to pay attention at discursive construction, such as corporational determinism, and now they help companies to present themselves as necessary condition for change. At the same time, corporate narratives minimize the role of other important actors, such as governments, smaller competitors, social movements, users. We are working on these aspects, and this is very important, especially today. Critical scholarship should scrutinize not only the economic, technical, and legal factors that are underpinning the power of big corporations, but also the discursive factors. We have to pay attention at the way in which these corporations narrate themselves and to which channels they narrate themselves and to whom they try to arrive to get with their messages. And finally, policymakers should pay attention to the historical and long-term narratives on technological and societal change. Also looking for systemic analysis of the agency of corporation, but also of local, national, and international actors. And I think in this case, history is a very relevant issue. So we should study the history of digitization to understand the contemporary situation. Sociology is important, the material aspects of technology, like Stefan said before, are very important. And I think that the idea of corporational determinism should be just a tool to understand better this economy of the narratives about digitization today, but we should also go beyond this idea in the very close future. If you want to read something more about this, you have the two links to the paper, the scientific paper, but also for an article appeared on The Conversation, which is a British newspaper online. Thank you for your attention.